found my mother that had been murdered, so I called the police, and from there it started an investigation, and I ended up being charged with her crime. As two immigrants who came here from Jamaica, they wanted something, and they eventually got to a point where they were able to save their money and do nice things. They bought themselves a home, only to have it all taken 4 years later. When I think about them and I think about myself, I just say, you have to keep going, When it comes to prison and being in there for long periods of time, the question is not how, you just do. You just do. A lot of things that I do now, a lot of things I aspire to do, they were trying to give me when I was much smaller. And sometimes, just having your own ideals for things that you want to do, because when you're 15, you've got the world figured out. So, now as a grown man, I see the things that they were trying to show me. Owning something, working hard, sacrificing. And it's now at 46, I'm saying, okay, I get it. So, I get it. I always believed in me that something was going to happen for me. I didn't know what. I knew at times I would question it. I think anyone in that situation would. Like, is this ever going to end? Are we ever going to get to the truth? But there's always that small portion of you, that small piece of you that believes that it'll be corrected.
Huwe Burton.
Do you believe in justice? In a world filled with injustice and inequality, some dedicate their lives to fighting for what is right. In this video, we will showcase the incredible legal victory and triumph against injustice that will restore your faith in the power of the law. Or not. Meet one man who stood up against such corruption at a steep cost. The third Reuben brings you a piece from the National Registry of Exonerations, which is a project of the Newkirk Center for Science and Society at the University of California, Irvine, the University of Michigan Law School, and Michigan State University College of Law. Huwe Burton, then 59, was dead when the Bronx, New York police arrived at her apartment on January 3, 1989. She lay face down in her nightgown on her bed, having been stabbed in the neck. The fact that her underwear had been taken off gave rise to suspicions of a sexual assault. Her purse was scattered across the living room floor, and a telephone cord was wound around one wrist. Huwe Burton, the 16-year-old son of Huwe Burton, had called 911 and informed the authorities that he had returned home from school shortly before 3 o'clock. He claimed he assumed his mother had merely rushed to the store even though he saw the TV was on and her possessions were scattered across the floor. He claimed that before he could take a closer look around the property, a friend asked him to her place over the phone. He didn't realize his mother's body was in his parents' bedroom until he got home at around 5:40. Although Huwe Burton's moment of death was never determined by the authorities, they thought she was aware of her killer. Investigators took a fast interest in Hugh. His claim that he remembered the precise time he had returned home from school, 2:47 p.m., made them doubtful at first. It appeared to the investigators that he was attempting to provide an alibi. Secondly, even though he claimed to have attended class all day, his first-period instructor informed the authorities that he had not been in her class the previous morning. Burton was questioned by police on January 5th. They interrogated him for 3 hours. On 2 occasions, he begged to talk to his father, who was out of the country. Those requests were refused. They told him he was lying about when he was at school. Burton's acquaintance on the afternoon of his mother's death was a 13-year-old girl with whom he had had intercourse. The officers informed him that he had committed statutory intimate assault and may face jail time.
While the interrogation was not videotaped, Burton would later create a written and videotaped confession in which he said he was high on crack cocaine and killed his mother during a quarrel. He was taken into custody and charged with murder.
Police in Westchester County, New York, stopped a man named Emmanuel Green 6 days after Burton's confession. He was driving Mrs. Burton's Honda, which had been reported stolen the day before she died. Green shared a house with the Burtons. He had been interviewed early in the investigation, but police were unaware of his long criminal history, which included intimacy assault and robbery convictions. He was questioned by authorities and signed a statement saying Burton had gone to him for help after killing his mother. Green claimed it was his idea to make the murder appear to be the act of an intruder. Green was not charged as an accomplice in Mrs. Burton's murder, despite being charged with larceny, possession of stolen items, and obstructing prosecution. He passed away before Burton's trial. Burton later recanted his confession, claiming that it was pressured by the authorities. He unsuccessfully sought suppression of the evidence in pre-trial petitions and hearings. When Burton's trial began in 1991, his attorney, William Kunstler, sought to call an expert witness to testify about false confessions and why a 16-year-old child who was bred to respect authority and was grieving the death of his mother would be especially susceptible to police interrogation tactics. There was little research on the subject of false confessions at the time, and the trial judge disallowed the testimony. On September 25, 1991, a jury found Burton guilty of second-degree murder and fourth-degree unlawful possession of a firearm. He was sentenced to prison for 15 years to life. Burton's case was forwarded to Steve Drizin, an attorney and expert on false confessions at Northwestern University's Center on Wrongful Convictions, by the Innocence Project in 2009. By that time, extensive research had been conducted on the causes and repercussions of false confessions. The studies firmly proved that they exist, and that Burton's circumstances as a young, fearful adolescent may have resulted in a false confession. Drizin hired Laura Cohen, an attorney from Rutgers Law School's Criminal and Youth Justice Clinic, to take on the case. And the Innocence Project in New York joined Burton's legal team in 2013. After Bronx County District Attorney Darcel Clark established a conviction integrity unit in 2016, the team asked the unit to look at Burton's case. The parties then spent 2 years researching Burton's confession, the methods used to get it, and the apparent discrepancies between his confession and what the evidence suggests happened in the apartment. First, the inquiry revealed that the police who interrogated Burton had already obtained false confessions in a homicide case 3 months prior. While those 2 suspects were acquitted at trial, the coercive techniques used on Burton were similar. Burton's counsel was not informed of their conduct during the investigation. Mrs. Burton's body was initially examined at the time of her son's confession and revealed a single fatal wound that had gone through one side of her neck and out the other. In his confession, Burton stated that he stabbed his mother once with a serrated knife before she collapsed on the bed. However, a later, more thorough examination revealed that she had been stabbed twice with a smooth-bladed knife. She had also been beaten, something Burton did not disclose in his confession. Burton claimed he dropped the knife on the floor after stabbing his mother. However, the knife found at the scene was hidden behind the bed, and testing revealed no signs of blood. Burton admitted in his confession that he only shackled one of his mother's wrists, which is how she was discovered. However, despite conforming to the crime scene, binding a single wrist would not detain a person. Finally, Burton's confession was replete with police language rather than boyish descriptions. He was excited on cocaine, associating with a companion, and proceeding up a road, he added. The police had concentrated on Burton because his teacher had indicated he wasn't in his first period class, and they had used that obvious falsehood to break him down and force the confession during the interrogation. However, immediately after her confession, The teacher informed the police that she had verified her records. Burton was in class that day. This was also not disclosed to Burton's counsel. Separately, the CIU probe discovered major contradictions in Green's police testimony. Green informed investigators that he used the telephone cable to bind both of Mrs. Burton's wrists. Burton's confession mentioned only one wrist, which is how the body was discovered. Green informed authorities in one statement that he took the knife from Mrs. Burton's neck. In another, he stated that Burton had removed the knife. Green claimed he directed Burton to dispose of the murder weapon before placing a steak knife near the body. A more likely scenario, the CIU wrote in its request for Burton's charges to be dropped, is that Green got rid of the knife because it was his knife and it linked him to the crime as the actual assailant. The problem, according to the CIU inquiry, was that Burton had already confessed by the time police apprehended and questioned Green. Rather than viewing the new evidence for what it was, a violent neighbor driving a car taken from a murder victim, the police used Green to validate their hypothesis of the crime, with Burton as the murderer and Green as an accessory. Burton was granted parole in 2009. During his parole hearings, he claimed he stabbed his mother. The CIU saw this as a necessary step for parole, not an admission of guilt, and said it did not influence whether his initial confession was truthful. On January 16, 2019, the Bronx District Attorney's Office recommended that Burton's charges be dropped. The three innocence organizations filed a motion to drop the charges and join the DA's proposal on January 24th. The accusations against Burton were dismissed that day by Bronx County Supreme Court Judge Stephen L. Barrett. Barrett presided over an earlier homicide case in which the detectives who interrogated Burton extracted false confessions from two innocent young men. Burton now works for an elevator repair firm and spoke in court following the decision. "It's been a long, long journey, and I'm grateful we've arrived," he added. "I stand here for that 16-year-old guy who had no one to defend him and who was not protected by adults at the time." Burton filed a compensation claim with the New York Court of Claims in July 2020. He filed a lawsuit against New York and its police department in U.S. District Court in October 2020. In June 2021, the city agreed to pay Burton $11 million to settle the lawsuit. Although late, the slow wheels of justice did prevail, although with a heavy cost. The cost being 19 years of his life spent behind bars. Sometimes prevailing against injustice is too small compared to that injustice. This has been a Third Reuben production. Please like and subscribe so not to miss further triumphs against injustice videos.